I didn't want to theorycraft this balance update, so I played multiple Chaos Knight lists and paid attention to what actually worked and felt good on the table. Since the balance update, I tested 3 different Chaos Knight builds. One is my comfort list, one is a list I've taken to a big event, and one is a detachment that got nerfed about 3 months ago and deserved a fair revisit. This isn't theory, these are my reps and what I learned. The first list is Iconoclast Fiefdom. It has a Knight Abominant, a Knight Despoiler with Profane Altar, and double Gatling cannons, a Knight Rampager with Tyrant's Banner, a Knight Tyrant who's the Warlord. He has the Pave the Way enhancement, 2 missiles, Volcano Lance, and Plasma. There's also a unit of Blue Horrors and 6 units of 10 Cultist mobs. At a high level, this is a big Knights list that uses Cultists to take early board control and force bad decisions. Basically, this list pushes objectives early with cheap Cultists. If the opponent doesn't contest them, I take control and move on. If they do contest them, the Knights follow up and punish that commitment. I've been playing this detachment for about 3 months now, mostly because of the strat nerf to Lords of Dread. After the most recent data slate, the only change I made was swapping the Rampager's enhancement from Diabolical Resilience to Tyrant's Banner. The detachment itself is really fun to play. Honestly, the main reason I stopped playing it about 9 months ago was because I needed time to paint a million Cultist models. I originally built this list just to have an excuse to run more big Knights, and I was honestly surprised by how well it worked. Within a month of the detachment releasing, I won a small RTT that only used the Grotsmith detachments. There's a lot of flavor here. Being able to sacrifice Cultists to power up your Knights feels very Chaos Knights, and it gives you a ton of early board control that lets you control the tempo of the game, especially if you're going first. It catches people off guard because this isn't what most players expect Chaos Knights to look like right now. The big downside is that this list struggles into armies that can just wipe all the Cultists in 1 or 2 turns. It also takes reps. Getting 70 plus models into the right places takes practice, and early on it's easy to burn a lot of clock just moving models. Once you have reps though, it becomes pretty straightforward. 2 matchups that feel very different with this list are Emperor's Children and Eldari. Into Emperor's Children, it's harder to deny their coterie buffs if they're playing Coterie of the Conceited, but it is possible. In those games, I'll often start 50 Cultists in reserve and bring them in on turn 3, or maybe turn 2 to power up specific Knights instead of exposing them early. Against Eldari, the Cultists were huge for screening Doom drops, specifically Fire Dragons coming out of Wave Serpents after they used their star drives to move 24 inches. I know that interaction changed in the most recent update, but the same idea still applies to things like Impulsors full of Night-killing units, or a Land Raider with a melee Death Star unit. I actually played this detachment into Eldari at Challengers Cup and managed to pull out a 10-10, which surprised a lot of people, including myself, especially since I told them to expect me to score 0 differential points. I don't really think this list needs changes. I'd love more Blue Horrors or maybe a 20-man Cultist unit, but there just aren't enough points to make that work. Overall, this list is fun, it rewards reps, and it can absolutely compete if you put the time into it. The second list I want to talk about is Traitoris Lance. This one has a Knight Desecrator who's the Warlord, a Knight Ruinator with the Veil of Medjugorje, 3 Wardog Executioners, 3 Wardog Carnivores, 2 units of Bloodletters, and 2 Skull Cannons. This list is all about buffing Wardogs through Knight Auras and using Battle Shock to turn on the army-wide +1 to wound. With the balance update, the Desecrator and Ruinator dropped by 30 points total, which basically undoes the Carnivore increase from a few months ago. I put this list on the table right after the Codex dropped. It's very similar to the Index list I ran for about 4 months, so I felt comfortable taking it to larger events with only a few reps. The week the Codex came out, I took my Index list to a 100 plus player event and went 3-3. This was my best result at that point. I then took this list to another 100 plus player event and also went 3-3, so it felt like it was performing at a similar level, even though I had fewer reps with it, and the meta was heavily dominated by knights at that point, which meant a lot more difficult matchups for me. This list has enough shooting to solve the volume of fire problem knights sometimes have. Rerolls from the Desecrator and extra AP from the Ruinator make the Executioners do real work. And getting a Carnivore Claw up to AP 5 is still really funny if your opponent doesn't have an invulnerable save. The biggest adjustment for me coming from Index was the toughness change on War Dogs. I don't think I was ready for how much easier they are to kill now. The list itself is pretty straightforward. If you manage your auras well, it performs. You can use a long leash to extend a nice aura to any 2 War Dogs on the board, which helps if you need to break your castle, but it has to be used in the command phase. That means you really need to visualize your turn ahead of time and know which War Dogs are going to need buffs. The plus 3-inch aura army rule bonus helps, but you'll still be leaning on that strat. 2 matchups that stood out to me with this list were Astra Militarum and Necrons. Against Guard, I was honestly shocked. I expected them to kill maybe 1 Carnivore while I was in melee with their tanks, but they killed all 3 in a single turn without falling back. Against Necrons, though, the list felt great. The Executioners had enough shots to deal with Lich Guard bricks, and the Skull Cannons let me turn off reactive reanimation. The Ruinator with the 4+ invulnerable save and shooting and -2 to hit also did a great job soaking Doomsday Arc activations while pushing forward. One thing I'd like to test is dropping the Skull Cannons for Fleshhounds to improve secondary scoring, and possibly adding Tyrant's Shadow to the Desecrator. Overall, this list lives and dies by aura management. It works, but it still needs some tuning. The third list I want to talk about is a revisit to Lords of Dread. This list has a Knight Despoiler with Putrid Carapace and 2 Gatling Cannons, a Knight Tyrant with Warpborn Stalker, 2 missiles, Harpoon and Flamer, another Knight Tyrant who's the Warlord with Mirror of Fates, 2 missiles, Volcano Lance, and Plasma. It also has 2 Wardog Carnivores, 2 Stalkers, and 1 unit of Blue Horrors. This is another Big Knights list focused on sticky objectives, but it's very much a post-nerf experiment. This is a brand new list I built after the most recent update. It's based on a post-codex list I used to play, but I haven't revisited it since Claimed for the Dark Gods got nerfed. Before that strat nerf, I ran a version with 5 Knights and Blue Horrors and went 2 RTTs with it. It was excellent at sitting on objectives and scoring, even if a knight was about to die, because I could use the strat to sticky the objective at the start of the shooting phase. Because of the data slate timing, I hadn't really given this detachment a fair shot until now. I've had 2 practice games with this list so far. Into Custodes, it felt really good. I bubbled Carnivores around the Despoiler, infiltrated the Blue Horse to force engagement, and killed everything I could see. Into Orcs, it felt terrible. It didn't feel like I had enough tools to score, kill, and avoid a meaningful hitback. What surprised me was that the strat change didn't feel like much of a difference in either game. I was still able to sticky 3 objectives both times. Mirror of Fates is an excellent enhancement on knights, especially since most armies rely on stratagems to kill them efficiently. I also really enjoy the Doom Drop Tyrant. It's just incredibly fun. That said, I struggled to justify War Dogs here. The detachment rules and strats really only benefit the knights, and the War Dogs tend to die very fast. That might be a me problem. I might just need more reps. One thing I really like about this detachment is how simple it is. 17 models total gives you a lot more time in a tournament to think ahead and set traps. The more decisions you force your opponent to make, the more likely they are to make a mistake. At the end of the day, this is a stat check list. Some armies won't be able to kill you, and you'll win. Others will kill everything in 2 turns, and you'll lose. I'd like to test a version with 4 Knights and 30 Blue Horrors. I've seen players go 4-1 or 5-0 with something similar, but I don't have the models for it yet. Overall, I think Lords of Dread can still work. It just needs to fully lean into the Knight-heavy playstyle while having enough early game presence. If I were playing a GT this weekend, I'd bring Iconoclast Fiefdom. I have enough reps with it to adapt quickly, whether I'm facing mass shooting, mass melee, or anything in between. For an RTT, I'd be interested in taking a Traitoris Lance and seeing how it performs with a bit more tuning. If I were just learning Chaos Knights, I'd probably start with Infernal Lance. The defensive stratagems give the army a lot of durability, and there's a reason most Chaos Knight players are using that detachment. I don't personally run it right now because I don't have all the models finished to play the way I want, but it's a solid place to start. If you've been testing Chaos Knights after the balance update, I'd love to hear what's been working for you. Let me know in the comments.